Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our second day of Garlic Week. We started yesterday, Monday, with Phil Simon, who gave us the lay of the land with some history of garlic. If you weren't able to catch that one, you can go to the YouTube site that you're on right now and go to the playlist for the Winter Vegetable Sagra, and you can watch that recorded video that includes the Q&A from the end at the end. So all of these presentations will be recorded, and you'll have the opportunity to watch them later and into the future. Today's our second day, and I'm really excited to have with us Avram Drucker, who is from Garlicana down in Southern Oregon in a small community called Tiller, which is just, I'm not sure, far off of I-5 to the east, off of maybe exit 58. Sorry, I'm not going to give them directions all the way to your home, Avram, but in a community down there, he's been growing garlic for over 20 years. And he participates in something highly unusual that not very many people in the world do, which is breeding garlic by true garlic seed. He's going to talk a little bit more about that today. And he was inspired to do that after reading the research of Phil Simon and Maria Jenderick in 2004. So Phil that we heard from yesterday, it had been doing some research that he found out about and got excited about starting to do this work. And he has also co-authored a book with Ted Meredith called Growing Garlic from True Seed. He wrote that in 2012. So I'm really excited to have Avram here today with us to talk a little bit about his journey and how he fell in love with garlic and decided to do such amazing and not easy work, and what kind of breeding projects he's got going on right now, and talk to us a little bit more and educating us on garlic. And also he wrote the garlic zine that just came out. We're calling it short garlic zine, but it's garlic types and market niches. You can check that out for free on the eatwintervegetables.com website. It's posted there. It's 12 pages long. You can take a look at that. And before I let Avram say a couple words if he wants, I just wanted to share with you a story about how I met Avram. I almost say garlic every time I say Avram because they're like synonymous with one another to me. We were at probably 8 years ago or something, maybe longer. We were at this farmer to farmer exchange meeting at a hot springs in Oregon, and he was sitting behind me, so I couldn't see him. And I think that we were in a session where we were talking about potatoes or something, some kind of storage, something or other crop. And we were all sitting on the floor, and I was sitting on the floor in front of him, and I was very interested in this topic. And I heard someone from behind me talking about storage, and I had noticed that I smelled garlic. And I was like, wow, it really smells like garlic. And I thought they were preparing for lunch because lunch was coming up soon, and I started getting hungry. And I love the smell of garlic because I'm Sicilian American. So this is a very comforting smell to me. And then all of a sudden, the person behind me that was talking about storage then started talking about a lot about garlic, in quite a lot of detail and with a lot of authority, knowing quite a bit about it. And I turn around, and there's Avram, and you won't see Avram today, but I mean, just in the first glance, saw many tattoos of garlic on his body. And I thought, well, I think that maybe this is where the smell of garlic is coming from. And then I introduced myself, we met, he offered me some garlic that he had he had cargo pants on, he had garlic, different types of garlic filling his pockets, and shared with me and talked to me about a lot of that. And that's when we met, and I was so excited to meet someone that knew so much about garlic and just opened up a completely different world to me, and thinking about garlic in a very different way. And I'm a person that had used garlic my entire life and worked in agriculture, but just had no idea this entire world that existed, that Avron was a really huge part of and a leader in. So Avram, if you want to say hi before we show, if there's anything you want to add before we show your video, but we've got about a 25-minute video, I believe, that he's going to share some information with us about garlic.
Hello. Nothing to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you put together a great presentation for us. Your friend Fiona, who does the illustrations, has added a lot to it. I'm very grateful for you to do this work for us. He's in Corvallis right now because internet is not great where he lives. So he's put a lot of effort into this, and really appreciate it. The folks that are watching are on YouTube. So you guys are on YouTube, you will see a chat on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're on your phone, it comes up somewhere there too, because I know people use it. So you can chat your questions in there, and I will read them. I have another screen up here. I can see them. I will read them to Avram afterward, and he will answer as many questions as we have time for. So with that, go ahead and let Abba, thank you, Abba is our tech person, show the screen.
Hi, my name is Avram from Garlicana Farm. It's a small vegetable farm in Southern Oregon at the southern end of the Cascades on a tributary of the South Umpqua River. The farm primarily grows garlic, which is sold as seed. We grow about a couple thousand pounds of garlic, and from dozens and dozens and dozens of varieties. I got into garlic when I was younger. Didn't grow up with it. It wasn't really a part of American Ashkenazi cooking. Didn't quite fit into to blintzes and kugel. But it was much later where a friend of mine was ill, and he put some raw garlic on a piece of toast, some peanut butter, and took a bite of that, and thought it was kind of weird, but liked it, and started eating ridiculous amounts of garlic. I kind of think that obsession is somewhat arbitrary. You can be obsessed with anything, and I happened to find something that was, I don't know, suited my temperament, whatever. Later, I was visiting friends who lived on a small bit of land above in north central Washington. And that land was, uh, remote, but it was a few miles up the road from a garlic farm, the Libby Creek Garlic Farm. And they grew a variety, just one variety, Spanish Roja. And that stuff was vastly different from anything I'd been eating. I'd been eating a lot of garlic, but nothing that tasted like that. It was something else. And while I'd been spending some summer at this rural patch of land, and we would haul water up the hill and learn how to garden, or a little bit anyway. But I brought that garlic back to the city and planted some behind our squat. And it happened that the squat burned to the ground, and the garlic that was planted behind the house was scorched over along with everything else. Later, moved to Southern Oregon, and a few of us urban squatters started homesteading some land and developing some other piece of land and gardening there. And it gave me the circumstances which to get deeper into growing everything, but garlic in particular. We would got listed and got seeds. We were part of Seed Savers Exchange, and I was gifted a number of garlic varieties from the now late Joel Girardin, and he in turn had gotten a lot of garlics that he grew from John Swenson, who, along with Phil Simon and others, went on seed collection missions in Central Asia and the Caucasus. I would look for, in these various garlic varieties, look at the plants and what they looked like, and look at the bulbs and what they looked like, and tasted them, and would see ones that looked indistinguishable and others that looked really different. And then read the seminal Growing Great Garlic by Ron England, and looked at studies that were done by Margaret Pooler and Philip Simon on studying garlic and using isozymes. But it wasn't until 2004 that there was a genetic fingerprinting study done by Gail Volk, Adam Hank, Christopher Richards out of Fort Collins. And this little chart looks really confusing, but it confirms that some of these horticultural groups exist, and sometimes the relationship between them. And it leaves a lot of questions open. And this was in 2004, so things have changed. But what interested me in this study was one's garlics that did not fit into the horticultural groups, the weird outliers. But first, I should just get into the groups themselves, because classification it's a way of understanding what we're looking at. And there's lumpers and splitters, and the lumpers of us are ones that try to see similar traits in things and group things together to get an understanding of what they are and see how things are, how they're similar. And splitters are those of us who see differences between things and are able to look for their unique traits. So classification is only useful insofar as it's useful. It's if it's a useful lens to understand what we're seeing, then it's helpful, but it's not the be all and end all. But anyway, there's soft necks, hard necks. That's the usual standards. Soft necks tend not to bolt, even though they do bolt if subject to cold or stress. So they're not taxonomically different from hard necks. But most of the time they don't bolt. They don't true stem. And hard necks do bolt and put up a scape, and the scape usually coils and uncoils, and that's how you get seeds and bulbils on those. So here's a few groups. Turbans, I'm going to go through these in roughly in order of maturity. Turbans, they're really the first to mature. Their flavors are earthy. They're not the most pungent, although the pungency of garlic has a lot to do with variety, but it also has to do with how cold your soil is in the winter and how much sulfur is in your soil. A high sulfur soil is going to make for hotter garlic. And all garlic, it has to be said, originates in Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, what are now those places, and went from there. It was on the Silk Road, and it's been cultivated for 6 millennia. So, back then you had Sogdians that were traversing the Silk Road, going east through China out to the Korean Peninsula and west across the Caspian Sea into the Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, or what's now those countries. But garlic went north into Siberia, and from the Caucasus it went to Europe and south to the Middle East and changed. So as the mutations happened over long periods of time and developed into these different varieties. Anyway, turbans mature early. Artichokes, they're one of the soft necks, and you can see by the photograph that there's no stem there. They store really well. They store until spring. They have a kind of really simple, fresh, green, grassy flavor, and their plants are really big. They're quite satisfying to grow. Asia is a big continent, and the names of all these horticultural groups can be really arbitrary. If I might have named them something else, but this is the systems that we use. But there's a lot of diversity within the Asiatic group, but they all have that similar umbel capsule, the space there, that was weird sheath and looks like some bean pod. Some of them have vertical leaf architecture, some of them have more lateral. The photograph there is of a garlic, the Pyongyang from North Korea, and it's a super spicy garlic. Whereas that is Sakura, and Sakura is really mild and sweet. Doesn't store well, but they're both within that same group. They both have similar traits, but then they have traits that are very dissimilar. Glazed vertical leaf architecture, nice scape coil. They're they have these kind of satiny skins. They have a dark, oily flavor. They're good, and they're really productive too. Creoles, they originate in the kind of areas surrounding the Pyrenees, southwestern France, northeastern Spain, Euskadi, the Basque Country. They have their leaves are not particularly fibrous, and nor are their scapes. Really make great scape pesto, and they store for very long. They're some of the best keeping garlics there are, and they've got nice, gorgeous crimson coloration. The garlic there is Donosti, and that one is Creole Red. So you can see differences between varieties, these two varieties within the same group. But most of the diversity still is generally between the horticultural groups. Porcelains, they're often get really big. They're super spicy. The plants are tall. They're nutty when they're roasted. The purple stripes are ancestral. That horticultural group is really if we went back to that chart, they'd be in the middle. All garlics are descended from purple stripes, at least the ones that were, for the most part, in the genetic study. So they're considered ancestral. It would be interesting to see more varieties that were collected from the wild to see what the relationship is with domestic purple stripes. But yeah, they also have great storage. They're really vibrant coloration on their inner wrappers. They can be kind of spicy, but rich flavored. Marvel's quite hot, big plants with this nice inwardly curvaceous leaf architecture and thick scapes that are great for grilling. And they can store fairly well, but they're really, yeah, they're spicy. They're good stuff. There's a couple of them. The first one being Jupiter, and the second one being Lithuanian purple. Rocamboles, you can tell how closely spaced those leaves are in this nice tight scape coil. Yeah, they're really richly flavored, really complex, and have a sweet and kind of spicy. When I grew them east of the Cascades, they were much spicier than they are on the west side. But yeah, they also they don't store well. They're really easy to peel, but great in the kitchen. But yeah, they make it to about it's time to replant them. But they're like a seasonal thing. They're so good. Yum. Silverskins, that is what you generally see in a supermarket. Nice, pretty clove colors. Lots of cloves. They're hard to peel, and thus they store longer than anything else. I've had them store. Geez, I had some that stored up to 18 months, up to replanting them the following year. And yeah, they for the most part don't bolt, but I've had a percentage of them bolt when we've had really cold spring or had them lodge early. But yeah, normally they're easy to grow and don't bolt. And yeah. All right, so next we have garlics that were collected in Central Asia. The illustration on the left is of a garlic that Phil Simon and Barbara Hellier acquired between the villages of Amand Kutan and Kishlik in Uzbekistan. And notice the lateral leaf architecture there. I don't favor lateral leaf architecture, but the bulb was awesome. And the illustration is of the bulbs from that variety, which I named Kishlik. It's kind of a coin toss between Amand Kutan and Kishlik, that definitely having it from where it's from. And as a side note, I've acquired a number of garlics from different places, and a number of them from GRIN, from the germplasm repository. And I find it important to research where these garlics are from and name them as with some either geographical or reference to where they're from, or nearby landmarks, or in this case, the village of Kishlik. And really check out what it is for where garlics are from. I think we can use any plants, but for me, garlic as both a window into history and as a place where there's people who live there, what their lives are about, and to know something about it, and to respect and honor where those places are and the people who live there and what their lives are like now. But back to the garlic, the photograph there is not actually of Kishlik. That is a variety that came out of Kishlik. This was the first generation progeny. Because Kishlik, like a number of the garlics that were collected in Central Asia, was a fertile garlic. Most garlic is male and fertile, but this one was fertile, and I was able to get true seeds from it. And if not for those seed collection missions, I wouldn't have access to such an abundance of that genetic diversity, which has led toward being able to create new garlics. So I got into growing garlic to true seed at the suggestion of Barbara Hellier. She suggested I read this paper when I was acquiring all the weird oddball varieties from Grin that didn't fit into the groups. I wanted to see all the diversity that was out there within Allium sativum. And reading this paper was just a new world of garlic. And the process was a little confusing to me, and I trialed dozens and dozens of accessions to see if I could coax seeds out of them. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kind of fumbled through it. And eventually came up with some success. Had a few seeds here and there, and a couple of them germinated, but then died. And then after a few years in, I began collaborating with my friend and colleague, Ted Meredith, who wrote this awesome book, which unfortunately is going out of print. It's the best book on garlic there is that I've seen thus far. I mean, I was inspired by, like a lot of people, by Ron England's Growing Great Garlic, and learned a lot from it. But Ted has managed to kind of encapsulate all aspects of garlic in a really understandable way. So he ended up. I would grow the garlic out to seeds, and then send Ted seeds, and he was much more on it than I about being able to germinate seeds. So he would germ them. Our success was maybe 5% would germinate, and some of those would make it to bulb. And then eventually he would send me bulbs, and I would grow them out. And every little bulblet was precious. We were like everything, even the tiniest one. And it turns out that sometimes those tiny ones that were not as vigorous, after a few years, turned into interesting varieties. And some of the most vigorous ones were unstable and showed irregular growths and eventually discontinued. But there was a process that we kind of were able to come up with for growing garlic to true seed. And we wrote a little article about it so that the process was more accessible to others, and hopefully others could kind of try their hands at it and not go through as much of the learning curve. So there's some garlics in the field and flower. But getting back to it, the first thing was that garlic, when it escapes coil and they uncoil, and then the umbels develop and they're embedded with bulbules. The bulbules actually need to be removed because they are taking energy away from the plants to actually flower. So there's some bulbule removal for you. There's one that was before, and that same one after, and another before and after it's plucked. And then you're sometimes I've left them in field and removed bulbils in the field, which unfortunately creates a lot of garlic weeds the next year. Eventually kind of developed a compromise between removing the scapes early, and I tend to pull them when the plants are when they've come in the field and the bulbils are ready to remove. Then I just harvest the whole plant, sever the scape, and and hang the garlic, but then pluck the bulbils and then put them into the scapes into buckets of water with a bit of sugar in them. Eventually, the plants will go into flower, and some of the differences between flowers. Some of them have white petals and yellow anthers, and sometimes they have purple anthers. Supposedly, purple anthered accessions tend to have greater propensity for fertility. I've managed to get seeds out of both. There's some more purple in the petals, and that's definitely after most of the bulbils are removed. And then you're trying to keep the plant alive to the next stage. So when they're in flower, anthesis is a 5-day window. So if you're going to get any kind of crossing between varieties, it has to be within that window. So I've tried to do open crossing and then rely on selection for creating and seeing new things. And for me, the bees are the primary pollinator. I think, according to the paper, they used bottle flies, which were a little less rough on the flowers, but the bees do well. Nice to see them there. And there's definitely a purple anthered type. Eventually, you have the seed. If you can keep the plant alive and change your sugar water out, and you'll see the seed capsules swell up. And months later, it takes a long time for these things to dry down and produce seeds. And on a good year, you'll get a lot of seeds. I think that's a second generation of a variety that was, again, collected from the wild in Central Asia. The next step is germinating the seeds, and germination still is somewhere between 10 and 20%. And this is generations out, and it's still pretty low, and it can take a long time too. Like, I don't know, I've had seeds sprout in repurposed potting soil used for potting tomatoes, 3 months after starting. So it can take a while, but eventually you'll get some germ. And there's some in a prop house waiting to germinate. And then I have seedlings that are transplanted into the garden out of a population of, let's say, starting 100 seeds. Let's say you transplant 20 of them. And out of that, I might select from each accession that 20 that come out. Maybe you have replant 5. But the first year, though, after these seedlings come up, it takes a couple of years to produce a bulb. After the first year, you're just getting these little bulblets. And it's the second year that they actually turn into bulbs. And even then, it's a few years in before you get, an actual bulb. And then it's a matter of selection. So I'm selecting for traits I like. I like vertical leaf architecture. I like to see good plant vigor. I want to see disease resistance, which is hard to assess because you actually have to have it to be subject to disease in order to see. There's bulbs. At least for the first few years, I'm not really selecting for flavor. It's hard to. I've literally hundreds and hundreds of accessions, and I don't have the wherewithal to taste each one of them. But if something's super spicy or has particularly striking, and I'll notice it. But at first, I'm selecting for traits like looking at the plants and the bulbs, and when I'm seeing there, and obviously I'm selecting for charisma, color, and symmetry. I liked that this one had really symmetrical um, bulbs. And that is from the Anaris garlic. Anaris was the first generation progeny from Kishlik. And this has also been saved seed from, and I'm on to a generation after Anaris as well. And that's that. The all the illustrations from this, and in fact, the whole slideshow is really strung together by my friend Fiona Murray, and her artwork is gorgeous. And you can find her on Etsy. And yeah, I would have not strung this together without her immense help, and I'm very appreciative of that. And that's about it for now.
Thank you, Avram. That was fantastic. A lot of good information there. It was really interesting to hear about your personal journey, as well as go through some of these types, which is the breeding and the types is something that we did have quite a few questions about yesterday. And there's some questions that have come through YouTube, and some people actually have also texted me to ask. So I'm going to share about that. But I want to say that the book that you mentioned, I have it also here, the garlic book. Someone did mention that even it is going out of print, like you said, but there's an e-book version that's available. So I don't really know what an ebook is. So I think it's like something like Kindle that you would put on your device and you can read it electronically. So at least there's still that out there, and maybe you can, like, people can find some used copies, because it is a really fantastic book. I have 3 garlic books, and I feel like that's the one I look at the most. So we have a few questions I wanted to go through with you, Avram, and give you a chance to talk about it. I want to say, I do want to say something for myself though, is that this was so curious. I wrote it down as a note that you talked about the peanut butter and garlic, because I just had someone just tell me that they had a friend when growing up that they ate peanut butter and onion sandwiches. I've never heard of such a thing. Was this person doing it just for health purposes, or they like the flavor of this?
At the time, they were sick and put raw garlic on their toast, and I'd never considered such a thing.
No, sounds very strange.
It did to me at the time, and shortly thereafter, it was just common practice.
And so you do that now? You eat peanut butter and garlic together?
No, I would just eat a lot of raw garlic. I mean, on pretty much everything.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Just wanted to mention that. That was interesting. Okay. So here's some more questions for you. So, someone said, assuming that all soft necks are off limits for crossing since there's no flower, are there any traits that you wish that you could get out of the soft neck types?
Storage capacity, long dormancy, the Silverskins in particular, and they share that with Creoles, have really tight clove skins, and they're you almost never see areophid mites on either Silverskins or Creoles. And Creoles I've been not successful at coaxing any seed out of. It could be that in a controlled environment, you would be able to get the Creoles to the point of flowering. And I have tried to pluck bulbils out of Silverskins as well when they bolted, but they have really tiny cloves that are bulbils that are just very embedded, and I've not gotten either of them to get out to true seed. But the storage qualities are would be worth incorporating. I mean, garlic has is 3% is diverse. So 97% of all garlic is genetically identical, which is a lot more than we are as a species. But um, I have seen traits appear from um, varieties that are from that would have, I don't know, the coloration of a Creole in something that there was no Creole crossed in. So um, and that's pretty random, but uh, I think that also in some of the um, uh, I mean, maybe it was some of the stuff that Phil had worked on, that there were soft necks that came out of some of their populations too. I have not had a non-bolting garlic come out of true seed, but I'm pretty sure that there were. I don't know if that answers the question, but
Um, a lot of people do have questions about like how does an asexually propagated crop, like how do you perform selections? Someone does also ask specifically, can you talk about how it works to adapt a variety to a new set of climates or soil conditions? A viewer yesterday talked about this and said that mentioned that maybe epigenetics plays a role in that.
um, hmm. At one point I got a garlic that somebody had brought back from Thailand. It was a white bulb with white cloves, um, not very many cloves, and it took a few seasons to adapt, and it changed into a fairly typical turban type, um, with purple coloration, different structure, a different plant structure that's changed.
Mhm.
So you figure if garlic started in Central Asia and it made its way to different parts of the world, those changes sometimes were as a result of genetic mutation, but often there's a lot of duplication, because if it goes to different places, I think it was David Stern of Garlic Seed Foundation that was telling me that they had taken music, which is a porcelain, and it was grown in Ontario, where it expressed 4 cloves, in upstate New York, 6 to 7 cloves, North Carolina, 7 to 8 cloves, and Florida, 10 to 12 cloves. And if you brought it from Florida back to Ontario, it might take a few seasons for it to revert to being 4 cloves. That doesn't mean that the genetics is any different. It just has different um, yeah, latitude and climate.
Mhm.
But sometimes there are genetic changes that happen. They're somewhat rare, but that doesn't mean they don't happen. As far as what was the first part of the question?
Just I think select if it was just how you do selection, or in how do you adapt it to your location when it's when you are actually it's asexual, and so how does it adapt over time to your specific conditions?
Sometimes it doesn't. I think that most of the time, most garlic is fairly adaptable, but things can express differently. Trying to think of an example. The main site where the Western Regional Plant Introduction Station is in Pullman, Washington, in Eastern Washington, is where the all the germplasm is grown out. But there's a backup site in Parlier, California, in the Central Valley, and I mean Barbara would Hellier would be able to speak better on this, but there's accessions that produce very well in the further south, larger bulbs, um, you know, better vigor, and vice versa. Um, at one point, I had a garlic that was from Grin. It was originally from Aleppo, and it's this diminutive bulb with lots of tiny cloves, no market value. And I'd sent some to Paul Palmer in Southern California, and he was able to grow that same garlic into these giant bulbs. They just had like 100 tiny cloves instead of only 25 tiny cloves. But so there is some adaptation, and I brought it back I got a sample of that, and it just changed to be the same, back to the same thing. So some garlics will never really adapt well and would do better in different latitudes. And you just grow things out for a few years and see how they do. There is northern vigor. So for the California garlic industry, most of the seed of the Silverskins is mostly produced in Eastern Oregon, Madras, and Bend. And then they cycle that down to California, where they get northern vigor. So they get better yields from garlic that's come from north to south. But I would think that there's only so much of that that's possible.
Yeah, thinking about latitudes, so we have Jay Bost, I'll just call him out, he's watching from Hawaii, and he's a corn breeder and also other crop breeder, and he's asking about how garlic changes as it moves toward the equator, and like, this is something we asked to Phil yesterday, and he wasn't quite sure. But he asked, does it always need some vernalization to bulb? In Hawaii, folks are growing, but vernalizing in the refrigerator. How is garlic produced in subtropical and tropical countries? Is it grown so high in the mountains that it does get vernalized? Like, do you have much experience or knowledge with knowing how garlic is growing further south?
I know that there's a whole Brazilian garlic industry, and I don't know if there's varieties that are specifically adapted. But if you went to Thailand, most of the garlic that's grown in Thailand is being grown the areas surrounding Chiang Mai and Lamphun and Lampang, and that would be in their kind of more further north and a bit more cold possibility. Vernalization, as far as everything that I have experience with, is necessary. A certain amount of cold days, and for growers who are growing in places like Florida, I generally recommend storing in cold for 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. There's been a number of studies, papers written on this. Some of the Israeli research is really good, but I don't have any personal experience. I'm interested in the stuff being experimented on in Hawaii, though, to see what accessions, what types of garlic have been used and the duration of vernalization and what the temperatures are. I mean, that would be, just definitely be interesting to having empirical data on it.
Yeah, I'll connect you guys after this with the email if you want to talk about that.
I believe that sending any germplasm to Hawaii is not permissible. But I'd be curious to see what the possibilities there, what can be experimented with.
Okay. Another question that came in that you have talked to me quite a bit about, which is great to see that there's interest, is what environmental effects on garlic? What soil and nutrient content in soils have effect on garlic flavor and pungency?
Soil sulfur content is imperative. If you have, anytime you're growing alliums or brassicas, you're mining the sulfur out of your soil, and having the more sulfur you're going to have, the more pungent your garlic is going to be, and the more, I believe, alum that's going to be there in the garlic. Also, cold temperatures affect pungency as well. But I've had several experiments that were the same garlic grown at similar latitude, similar, um, where, one year I think I had a plot where there was two plots pretty much next to each other, and one got gypsum and the other did not. And the same garlics were, one was much more pungent than the other were. The gypsum had been added. So that's pretty, to me, it's pretty crucial. I like spicy garlic. So having sulfur and iron really affects the color. I've seen garlic from the Midwest and from New York, and asked about their iron content, which seemed to be low. But our soils here in west of the Cascades, and it's generally pretty iron rich, and the color really comes out.
So the purple.
Yeah, purple and red,
Okay.
and yeah, all those shades of any of the color is really affected by iron. I'm sure there's other soil, the minerals that affect both color and flavor, but those are the major ones. One thing is that garlic mines selenium, and soils west of the Cascades are utterly deficient in selenium. So having selenium in your soil to provide, again, to your brassicas and your alliums is pretty necessary if you want to get that out of your diet.
Yeah, so I'm thinking like amendments, and someone does ask a question on the YouTube that says, how do you prep your soil for garlic? And they ask a follow-up question, have you experienced any diseases with the garlic you grow? But when I'm thinking about prep, I'm thinking about, what kind of addition, micronutrients are you also adding specifically for garlic?
It would depend on your soil test.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything?
That's a kind of a broad question. I don't quite know how to answer it.
Yeah, it's like, what is the soil type that it prefers, and what type of tillage, I guess, also, and are you using straw for weed suppression?
I use straw. I use rice straw. I have access to it. I need to add extra nitrogen because it really locks up the nitrogen availability. But the garlic would definitely prefer soil that is not like mine. I have heavy clay soil, and it's very challenging. I think the garlic would do much better in kind of very loamy, sandier soil that's better drained than mine. But hey, it's garlic's been grown all over the world in different conditions. It's adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as mulches go, I think there was a experiment done in the last couple of years out of Cornell that looked at different mulches, and it was I think, trying to recall the paper on it. I think it was Crystal Stewart was the lead on that, and they used white plastic and black plastic and raised and flat and straw, different mulches. Yeah, that would be thing to look at. But I've if you use a plastic mulch, you definitely see growth earlier because the soil is warmed. In my soil, given that it's clay and really slow to warm, other people's garlic who have lighter soils will look really good much earlier than mine, and mine will just be like plugging along and not doing anything. But once the soil gets up to 60 degrees and the nutrient availability is there, the garlic really takes off then.
Yeah, I mean, you say you have plots up in, I don't know if this is for production for seed that you're doing up in Sauvie Island with sandy.
They did grow outs. for me last year, and they have great soil, and they did plastic mulch. And yeah, one thing that was notable is that they did a grow out in tunnel. They did Donesty, Polish White, and Mount St. Helens, and there was some amount of brooming in that soil because I don't think that had adequate vernalization. So this year they're pre-chilling the garlic before it goes into tunnel production. The plastic does a great job for weed suppression, and you know, and also soil compaction from winter rain. Yeah, yeah, that was definitely curious to see different locations in which the garlics were grown. Adaptive seeds did a grow out. Myrtle Creek Farm, Barking Moon Farm did grow outs of a few different varieties, and seeing how different they performed in those circumstances.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And then for you guys that are listening, Avram gave us some different types of garlics, three or four different types that were grown in two different locations on his farm, I think, and then also Sylvia Island that Tim Wasdale, our collaborating chef, is tasting and is going to let us know what differences that he tastes in that, because Avram says it is quite striking, the location environment having such an impact on flavor. Somebody is asking what your preference is on phosphorus soil amendments.
Hmm. I've used such an amount of chicken manure over the years that my phosphorus levels are pretty high. So I'm at this point being careful not to be too excessive on my phosphorus. I think that a lot of us that have used, years of using, chicken products have noticed our phosphorus levels being high. I think initially I was using fish bone meal because it was it seemed like at the time it seemed high phos, because my phosphorus levels when I started off with acidic clay soil were really low. But so many years into that soil, it's definitely changed. Is there a more specific question about that?
They asked about what they just said, that they, according to their soil tests, their garlic is mining the phosphorus out of the soil, so they have low phosphorus. Any preference on phosphorus soil amendments?
Yeah, I think that fishbone meal was like 522.0.
Wow.
And that was and it was breaking down quickly enough, but that was only in the first couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you do for a late phosphorus, or if it even matter if you apply phosphorus late in the season. But initially for soil test, um, a few years of using chicken manure, you'll be fine.
Do you side dress during the season, or just do your initial prep?
I've done some side dressing, but since I have straw mulch over it, I don't know how useful that is. I do foliar feed. I don't know if foliar feeding has any efficacy at all. I'm kind of skeptical of that. Um, uh, I mean, I use a sticker spreader into that and use some fish kelp mix. Um, yeah, I think for me, doing foliar feeding, it's more the process of it, because when you're foliar feeding, you're spraying every single plant. So it gives me the ability to inspect every single plant and find the ones that are buried under the mulch and coax them out. And um, uh, so if I do that a couple of times over, even if it's not getting anything out of the foliar feeding, at least I'm like paying attention to everything. And when you're looking over, like, 15,000 plus plants, it just helps you to see, oh, that one needs to be dug out. That one's a problem, or that one needs to be helped, or that one is looking good. And it gives you yeah, that's probably more helpful than the actual foliar feeding, but yeah.
We're right at 11, but I had two other questions, if that's okay, that I can ask that hopefully won't take you too long. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone just asked, do you think that environment plays a larger role on garlic flavor than genetics?
I don't know. Environment, does that include the soil? I mean, there's variables. That's a combination of genetic, soil, climate.
Yeah, I think just specifically the place that it's grown, meaning the climate, the weather, the soil, all of that is going to have, you know, as much impact or more than the actual genetics of the garlic. Needs more, it sounds like it needs more research.
Yeah.
You know, these things are really difficult. I mean, Alex and I did this with potatoes, and I might have told you this before, Avram, when we were doing our O Spud project, we started doing variety trials because we were looking at late blight, and we were looking at, well, that was the biggest thing that we were, you know, why we were doing the variety trialing. And so we wanted to taste each of them, and we just got crazy with all these tastings, because we tasted them roasted, and we tasted them steamed, and we tasted them French fried and potato chipped and all these different ways. But, you know, we tasted all these different varieties, but then we got into this like potato hole of like then tasting different varieties, the same variety of potato across different farms. And, you know, ones that were grown at Persephone, which is really, you know, heavy clay soils, and a completely different like climate and environment than Soviet Organics, which was quite sandy. And so it was really challenging. And then to be able to just, you know, to make sense of what we were doing, honestly, to make sense of what we figured out from that, other than, oh my gosh, this could be an entire world, like an entire career and lifetime to figure these things out, I feel like.
I wonder if the starch content of the potatoes was different based on the different, you know, if the different locations influenced the kind of starchiness of the potato. I know as far as garlic goes, that regardless if an artichoke garlic was grown in further north, further south, different soils, if you crushed it, I'd still be able to smell it and taste it and say, oh, that's an artichoke. They're really, you know, particular flavored. Then even if you didn't taste them, the aroma of some types of garlic is really distinctive, and so their genetics is important, regardless of the actual pungency of the garlic. And other garlics, their complexity could be a flavor would be influenced by different factors. And, you know, soil is really, I mean, I had, when I was moving back from Eastern Washington back to Southern Oregon for the second time, I had garlic that was still being grown where I was living outside of Spokane, and the exact same garlic grown in Southern Oregon tasted and smelled, you know, the smell was similar, but the taste was different. Was that because of the soil at Tolstoy Farm was sandy, or because it had been frozen winter long, or because the soil at Sisyphus Gardens was, you know, heavy clay and that never froze all winter? Or, I mean, there's too many variable factors for me to know that, but they're all have an influence.
Yeah, I know. I think we do this thing in, you know, in the breeding world where it's like G times E. So there's like genetics, and then there's like environment, which includes so many different variables that it's too hard to isolate what that those things would be that's affecting it.
Yep.
Okay, now the final question is, if someone wanted to start breeding garlic, which Garlicana garlic should they start with? I guess it's probably going to depend on what you want out of your garlic.
One thing that I've tried to do is grow some varieties out, and some of them that are not actually listed in the catalog. They're not necessarily of marketability, but they are ones that have a great propensity for producing seeds. And they're all, some of those are first generation progeny, some second generation progeny, and I don't, they don't merit, they're not charismatic or interesting enough as bulbs to grow them, come up with names for them and market them. But if people are, interested in some experiments, you can contact me, and I, we'll sometimes line folks up with ones that will just produce a lot of seeds. But the ones that were like Chimyan and Kishlik and Shakardis that were collected from the wild, those are good seed producers. And most of the time, most of the ones that I'm listing on the True Seed Progeny page will also be capable of producing, readily producing true seeds. And yeah, there's one Bay Eli that is first generation progeny of one of the ones that Barbara and Phil had acquired in Central Asia. That was the 10th out of, I think there was a total population of first generation progeny that was like 16 of them. And I'm not continuing on most of those, but some of them were phenomenal seed producers. And that's the one thing the first thing that you want to breed for is just the capacity to produce true seeds without minimal amounts of effort. And with each successive generation, you hope that there's less of a need to manually remove bulbils, and that there's a greater amount of germination and more flowering. And then you can use those to cross into other things, assuming that the window of anthesis is going to overlap. And if you do come up with something interesting, then like for me, I'll just isolate the plants and let them go full into flower, far away from other things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's a tangent, but yeah.
Well, this has been great, Avram. I really appreciate you putting together the presentation and making yourself available to present this to people and share about it and inspire people, because I remember when we did first meet, you gave me one of your pamphlets, which I should have right here. I usually have them very close by, yes, it's right here, that I just felt like was just fantastic information. Here's your booklet here.
Yeah, with Fiona's gorgeous art.
Yeah. And your really spectacular information about all these different types of garlic. And so this is, I don't know if this is available anywhere, but you do have a really amazing website, garlicana.com, where people can go and learn more about garlic, and you can order garlic seed, as well as you have shallots, right? And potatoes.
I don't do seed potato for sale. I do offer several accessions of shallot, vegetatively propagated shallots,
Including my favorite French gray shallot.
Yeah, those are the Alim Oshani high. Those are fantastic. Really short dormancy, but they're really quite tasty. I do wonder. I think it was Rena Kamenetsky, who's just an absolutely brilliant garlic researcher, said that she was able to get some types of Oshanii to go to True Seed. But yeah, that would be one that would be really benefit from going through meristem tissue culture. But
yeah. I would love to see those being more appreciated in the world. I really love them.
Yeah, their yield though it would be generally they come out somewhat small,
Mhm,
but there to my knowledge there hasn't been any meristem tissue culture that has been done with the gazelles.
mhm.
And, so if there's anyone who's interested in that, let me know.
Okay. And is the best way to contact you is your contact information on your website that they could get in touch?
Yeah, either through the contact page or just garlic at Garlicana.
Okay. And yeah, definitely everyone check out the website, check out the information there, check out the new market types. And
And Fiona's artwork on Etsy.
oh, yes. And it is Fiona Bearclaw.
Yeah.
And then the market niches, garlic types and market niches is I posted it on the Eat Winter Vegetables website that you can check out. And I think that is it.
Yeah, I want to thank Alex Stone for hosting me here.
Of course.
Yeah.
Avron's at Alex's house and has helped him put this together,
Hugely.
make the internet world, the virtual world happen.
Yeah, not going to happen from my location.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Folks, the rest of the week at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I hope that people can join us. And thank you again so much, Avram.
Thanks.
And Abba for being our tech support from Watershed Productions, who makes this possible. Thanks, guys.